Thursday evening. Never. We're a little bit late, but we're coming on. You got England coming up in an hour. The United States, if you're American, we're coming back and we're playing Wales. So if you're Welsh, you get to see the esteemed United States men's national team for the first time in about a year. It's the United Happy Hour. Let's get it started. This is the United Happy Hour presented by the Elite Football Show. I'm Pauly Questel. I am joined as always by my good buddy Joe. Joe, international break, pretty boring, but at least now we get some football. How about that?
Yeah, I mean, we did this on Tuesday, didn't we? It was just about to get underway, Paulie. I think there was a few international friendlies going on. Was it, I don't know, Faroe Islands versus the Isle of Puffins, something like that, God knows who. But yeah, these are the meaty games coming up now. I think there's a few Euro qualifiers tonight, playoff final games, and obviously international friendlies with some interest to both of us, England versus Ireland, and for you, Paulie, the United States against Wales, which is quite an intriguing game, to be fair.
Yeah, like the four nations are kind of getting involved and fighting against our forefathers, I guess, from Great Britain. Good evening, everybody. Yeah, we're a little bit late tonight. We had some scheduling issues, so not the true happy hour, kind of like a drink with dinner now. Before you get set for your international friendlies, which I am sure will be thrilling, get involved in the comments. We want to hear from you. Get involved in the discussion. And before we get into everything, I wanted to open with this. The Telegraph ran an interesting and exclusive article yesterday. They spoke with Burnley defender James Tarkowski, and the gist of it is this. He basically said, I am not re-signing a contract with Burnley because I want to take back control. What does he mean? Well, he has made it clear to Burnley that he wanted a move to a bigger club. He wants to play European football, whether that's in the Champions League or the Europa League. You know, if there are a team at that level that want him, it's a step up from Burnley, and that's what he wants to do in his career. And Burnley put a price tag on him that seemed to be a little high because no one would match it. And there were plenty of teams interested in James Tarkowski, and he was not granted a move. And I think we're seeing this a lot now in football, and I think it's going to become a lot more common. Right when Aston Villa slapped their £80 million price tag on Jack Grealish, there was a report that Grealish felt he was going to be priced out of a move to Manchester United, which is what he wanted. Maybe not this year, maybe next year. Whenever it was, he felt, they're putting a price that's too high on me. We know that Jadon Sancho had an agreement with Borussia Dortmund when he signed a new contract, and they said if we get a price, X amount, which turned out to be £108 million, we'll sell you. They didn't lower that price in the COVID market, and it probably should have come down as nobody could afford it. Do we see this as, something that might happen now is players aren't going to re-sign? Do we see the market trending this way in terms of that players aren't going to sign longer contracts because they may fear, now that Premier League clubs are financially solvent, they don't need money. They don't, Leicester City could sit there and say, well, we have Harry Maguire under contract for another 4 years. We'll sell him if we get the exact fee that we want and not a penny less. Yeah. Are we going to see players now try to run down their contracts or not even sign long-term contracts because they fear that they may be priced out of moves?
Yeah, no, exactly, Paulie. I think it's spot on, and I think it's quite telling when Burnley can do something like this. I mean, you say Leicester, but I mean, let's be honest, Leicester have had their fair share of success in the last few years, but Burnley now, being able to, turn down big money for one of their star players, so that's quite telling. But again, it comes to, like you said, the clubs financially these days, they're not under as much pressure to sell. Selling players is not high on their sort of their incomings in terms of finances, if you know what I mean. You've got TV money now, which is massive for them. So yeah, but it's not just players though, Paulie. I think let's not forget what role agents are playing here as well. You know, agents are helping their players take back control as well. Agents have become so influential in the game, and I don't know who James Tarkowski's agent is, if he's got one at all. I'm not sure, family member, whoever, but they'll have had some influence in the way James is playing this. And you can't blame players, really. I mean, in a way, you've got to look at this. You know, we've always said footballers' careers are quite short, aren't they, Paulie? But we've had COVID now. You know, COVID's making everyone realise that football can change overnight. You know, it's making clubs realise this. It's making players realise this. And I think players will understand as well, if we have something like this again, or the longer this goes on, clubs aren't going to be able to pay high fees for them. So clubs are never going to get what they truly want. You know what I mean? So that's the other issue as well. I think players. You say that
his agent is getting involved here and probably in his ear, but it's agents that are also part of this mess. And Chris Johnson, hello and thank you for subscribing. And that's a reminder to everybody else. Smash that subscribe button. At the time that we started recording, we were 12 off of 700. Help Hater, the big boss man, let's get the Elite Football Show to 700 subscribers. Then let's work on 750 after that. Keep mashing that subscribe button. But as I was saying, agents are kind of part of this mess because it used to be United wanted a striker. They called up Fulham and they said, right, Luis Saha, 12 million. And Fulham went, right, that'll keep the lights on for a year here. So done. Talk to Louis. And then, Sir Alex calls Luis Saha and says, you want to play for Manchester United? And he says, absolutely. Done deal. It's over. Now everything works through intermediaries. Everything. So first of all, Fulham says, well, we don't need your money to keep the lights on. We could do that ourselves. So Luis Saha led us in goals last year. So we're not going to sell him for less than 45 million. And then in order to get that deal done, you got to talk to one of these mega agents who's going to go and work as an intermediary and broker the deal. So now on top of the 45 million, you're paying agents fees and they're getting a commission here. Mino Raiola got 16 million for the Paul Pogba deal outside of the Paul Pogba deal. Like, he didn't just get the agent's commission on the 90 million and the agent's commission on Pogba's salary. He got an additional 16 million. So all of a sudden that 30 million pound transfer fee for a player who probably shouldn't cost that much becomes really expensive. And for a 27-year-old James Tarkowski, teams probably don't want to look at that money and say, like, we're probably better off going and getting somebody younger or developing our own guy. And if you're Tarkowski, then you have to say, right, or if you're any of the players, you have to say, right, like, I'm going to let this run out. And Joseph here brings up a really good point is if players want the good cash, they have to sign the long-term contract. And this is the rock in the hard place. Yeah. Because like you said, football's really short. If you have a career, you're not even going to start touching the higher ranks. If you're the average career person, you're not even going to start touching the higher ranks till you're in your 40s. Footballers are, if you're really good, you make it till you're like 34, 35. And then what? So you can't fault them for trying to get as much money as they possibly can because they need to set themselves up for the rest of their life. But you're one injury away from that so if you're 22 and a club offers you a 5-year deal at an increase of what you're making, it's hard to say no to that because if you get hurt next year, you still get to collect that money for the next 4 years. If you say, no, I have 2 years left on my deal and I want my contract to run out when I'm 23 because then I'll be able to have my pick of the litter. You're not going to sell me for you're going to demand way too much money for me. And if I am available on a free transfer at 23 years old, a lot of clubs are going to come after me. But if I get hurt next year, it's all over and I get nothing. And that's that's the rock and the hard place for these players.
Yeah, it's about whether you press G for gamble, isn't it? Because just to bring Joseph's comment up again here, if players want the good cash, they have to sign a long-term contract. That is exactly right. If what happens, Paulie, like you said, the player gets injured. The other way to look at it is someone like Tarkowski, let's take him as the example, seeing as we're talking about him. He could sign a 5-year deal at Burnley. I have no idea what he's on, and I have no idea what he'd be on if he moved to a big club. But I hazard a guess, he could probably earn nearly more in 1 year by moving to someone like Man United than he would over that 5 years or 4 years at Burnley. So, but like you say, that's only worth doing, Paulie, if he can guarantee that he's going to stay fit. And nobody can guarantee they're going to stay fit. I mean, injuries happen all the time. We saw what happened to Van Dijk. We've seen what's happened with, obviously, Joe Gomez. We don't know the extent of that injury yet, but if that's serious, it's so easy these days for players to get injured, and especially in these COVID times, Paulie, where we're seeing injuries now more than ever, more muscle sort of fatigue injuries, but still, players will be more susceptible to more serious injuries as the season goes on. It's a real press G for gamble, isn't it? And what you've got to remember with these footballers as well, they have families, Paulie, and that's why I always take it back to the human side. They have families, and at the end of the day, that's what their main concern is, and rightly so.
Yeah, and if they have the right person in their ear, they will be advising them, make your money now, but save it for later, because what do you do after football? You could either go into coaching, you could go into punditry, but how many ex-footballers are there in punditry right now? 25, 30, how many ex-footballers are there how many new ex-footballers are there every single year? And so I think, but I do think, but so there is that catch-22, like find your, get yourself the financial security. But I do think that there are going to be players, there are going to be more players like Tarkowski who are going to say, you know what, my best shot at getting out of here, maybe I'll sign that extension when I'm 22, but let's make it 3 years. So when I'm 25, I can have it. If you're not going to sell me at 25, I can make something. And this is relevant to United because they have a player who, some people want him to leave, and maybe he needs to leave. He's in his 5th season, and right now he's not on great form. But when you think about it, who's coming after him? And Chris brings up this question. Do you think Pogba will stay? And this is very relevant. It's going to lead us right in to what are we talking about on social media today?
Yeah, so what's on social media today, Polly? We've had a little scout around, Usher, so you do the scouting around. And I think what we can the biggest takeaway is this interview that Jamie Carragher's done on TalkSport Radio. And, I'll get your thoughts on it first of all. I'll just read out what he said for those people that haven't seen it. Jamie Carragher has said on Paul Pogba, the fact that we're still talking 4.5 years later, that it suggests he's never been good enough to be involved in different tactical setups. Would I pick Pogba in the MUFC team right now? No, I wouldn't. I don't think he's a great player. He then went on to say, Pogba's fans are saying Jose Mourinho was too defensive. Ollie isn't a top-level manager. And Carragher said he would be looking at himself rather than blaming, tactics and some of the regimes that Pogba's been under. Now, Paulie, first of all, before we sort of look at this in more detail, do you have any sympathy for Paul Pogba and, the way that he seems to have undoubtedly struggled to settle back at Manchester United because of working under different managers like Mourinho and Ollie? Or do you think Carragher is spot on when he suggests that actually the performances and the way Pogba plays should come from himself and not necessarily what's being told of by the coach?
That's a lot of loaded questions.
Yeah,
let's start with it. I do have some sympathy for him because that price tag, everybody expected 2 goals, 2 assists a game from him. They expected him to be Roy Keane versus Juventus every game, even though he's a midfielder. And Mourinho, as he was he played on the left of a 3 at Juventus. He had freedom to get up and impact the game. Mourinho moved him back a little bit. And he still had that. He was still getting up, and he was fantastic that first season, but he wasn't scoring, and people weren't finishing his chances. So the numbers weren't there, and fans turned on him so quickly because he has his brand and the Pog emojis and the hashtag like Pogba, whatever it was. and that never, so it never settled well. And then, he had the issue where it seemed like he was downing tools under Mourinho, even though statistically he was, at his, very good at the Mourinho's final games, but then he turns it on for Solskjaer. And then at the end, so it's become a situation where he has to leave because he's just never going to get on with the fans. And it is sad, but so I do have a level of sympathy for him. Having said that, he didn't, all he said up until last month, all he said was, I might be ready for a new challenge. He never said, I want to leave Manchester United or etc. But his agent kept running his mouth and he did not do anything to quiet that down. And that's always going to rub fans the wrong way. And it's never going to, and that's his fault. And then last month when he said, yeah, I'd love to play for Real Madrid someday. It's a dream. Like, I mean, you know what you're doing at this point. Like that. So you brought that upon yourself. Now, here's the thing. To bring out Carragher's comments, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer did get the best out of him when he first came in. But Manchester United in their current setup, in the current squad, are not capable of playing the style and the system that they played under Solskjaer when he first came in. So Pogba has to adapt to something else. Like it just wouldn't work if they tried to do that. Everything else that Jamie Carragher said is correct. At the moment, he's not good enough to play in this current United setup. But like the current United setup is, they need Fred and McTominay in midfield. They need to bolster that midfield because Pogba isn't playing well right there. And maybe it's because of Nemanja Matic. Maybe you can't play Pogba, McTominay. I do think that Pogba Fred or Bruno Fred should get a run. But Pogba hasn't been good right now. Bruno hasn't been great either. And in the current setup, you need that extra defense because otherwise United are shipping goals. So yeah, where does he fit? And yeah, as many mistakes as there are, like Jamie Carragher's spot on here, I'd be looking at myself because at the end of the day, Pogba isn't playing well right now. And he's got nobody to blame but himself, to the point that yesterday he started for France in this meaningless friendly where, Deschamps looks and goes, we have 2 Nations League games coming up. Those are my guys for that. The rest of you guys could play in this game. And even the French football accounts, which are always promoting Pogba, were like, his body language was concerning, which I thought was a little unfair, but they were, he didn't play that well. So, it's not just fans being ridiculous and saying, oh, he could do it for country, but he never does it for club, because he's not even doing it for country right now. So yeah, if Paul Pogba, if you're unhappy with this role that you have coming off the bench for Manchester United, you should be looking at yourself.
Yeah. And the reason I tend to go with Carragher on this a little bit as well, Paulie, is because he's been here 4 years now, hasn't he? As good as 4 years. When it's not like a typical knee-jerk fan. A news player has a rough first season and we all jump on his back and everything like that. We're seeing now this, we've seen it over a sustained period of time, and I think that's why it's fair now for the criticism to come. I mean, Carragher, I've heard him talk about Pogba a few times, and he's always been quick to say he's not a great player, he's a great talent. But at what point do we see the talent obviously change into a player? And what I just want to say quickly is, Paulie, is you're absolutely bang on when you say he doesn't deserve to be in the team at the moment because of his form. And I've got to be honest with you, in my opinion, I don't know about you, that's nothing to do necessarily with the tactical setup, or it's certainly not everything to do with the tactical setup. There's a lot of bare necessities wrong with his game at the moment that's wrong. He's giving the ball away too much. He looks to be getting out-muscled. His attitude doesn't look quite right. And that's where I agree with Carragher. They're all things really that you can do more yourself. It's not about where Ollie's necessarily putting you in the team. Wherever Ollie plays him in that team, or wherever he plays him with, he has to be able to pass the ball over 10 yards, Paulie, and do it well, very well, for the price tag that he's come in for, like you say. So I think that's why I tend to agree. And I think the timing of this is right now. We've got to a period of time where he's had enough time now at Man United. He's had opportunity. He's played in a wide range of roles as well. People have tried him as more of a defensive midfielder. People have tried him further up the field, probably not as much, but they have tried him up there. And it just doesn't seem work, and I'm just starting to wonder if he's becoming one of those players that you can have in a great team, if you know what I mean, Paulie, when you don't need to rely on him as much, and he's in that what I call a luxury player, a little bit like Ozil, the situation they've got at Arsenal.
I disagree with that. Okay. We haven't seen him in a big game in a while.
Yeah.
You know, the last derby he played in a derby, I believe the year Mourinho got sacked, but like we were terrible then. The derby before that was the one where he came out and scored 2 goals at the end. The last game he played against Liverpool was a game where was it Herrera who started the game injured and he got hurt and Lingard came on for him and Lingard got hurt and then Pereira and we made 3 subs before halftime and Marcus Rashford got hurt and Marcus Rashford could not walk and we didn't have any subs left and he had to play. And I watched that game back during lockdown, so just 3-4 months ago. And Martin Tyler and Gary Neville, and they were just remarking about how United were playing with 10 men because Marcus Rashford was not leaving the center circle, especially defensively. So, and they basically said, United basically said, we have no chance of winning this game when that happened. 3 injuries, we have no chance of winning this game. Our only chance is 0-0. Let's get a point out of this. And Paul Pogba put in a shift and was fantastic defensively. And at one point in the second half, he got the ball, managed to get it wide to Ashley Young, who was able to run down the right. And he turned the burners on to get himself into the box to get on the end of a cross that, was blocked, which you can't blame him for that. But in big game, it makes no sense. The in big game argument makes no sense to me because this is a player who scored a goal in the World Cup final. Like he was brilliant in the World Cup. Like France didn't have to make adjustments for him. United just.
Do you think there's an argument about quality of player though, Paul?
Yeah.
Plays alongside because obviously in that World Cup side he had Matuidi, I think, and Kante. He
did have a little bit extra defensive help, and I think that's what it is. Is they need that extra defensive midfielder. His form fell off, started to go down again when Ander Herrera got hurt because Fred, McTominay, Pereira, none of them could do what Ander Herrera was able to do. And Joseph asked, could it be COVID related? And it could be, but I think that boat has sailed. It's been 2 months now, and look, COVID affects everybody differently. Yeah. But if you're still struggling from COVID, you need to tell the boss that. And maybe he has, and maybe that's why he's been coming off the bench more. But you played brilliantly as a start, for 90 minutes against Leipzig, and then you were terrible against Arsenal. So that's the thing. And just to bring this full circle, to go back to Chris's question, do I think Pogba will stay? This is, it seems a lot of fans don't want him here. And this is the crux of the matter, to tie this back to Tarkowski, is after every game, we see it in the comments, and we see it in the comments on our shows, whether it's here or Red Devils Talk or the Masterclass, all the shows on the Elite Football Show Network. There's always someone who will say, exactly like what Carragher just said. The fact that it's been 4.5 years and we're still talking about it, maybe it hasn't worked out and he should buzz off and he should just go off to Madrid and we should let him in it. And the thing is, it doesn't work that way. I would like to marry Margot Robbie, but it takes 2 to tango.
Get in the queue, Paulie, get in queue. I'm first. Right.
Right. You could be first, but we still need to go to Margot Robbie and say, look, Joe wants to marry you, and have her be like, yes or no. If she says yes, I'm shit out of luck. If she says no, then I could ask. And if she says no, then same situation. But Real Madrid need to come out to try to sign Paul Pogba if we want to offload him to Real Madrid. And why would Real Madrid spend money on a transfer fee plus the fee that it'll cost to get Firmino Raiola, those agents' fees?
Yeah.
And then Pogba's wages. Why would they spend that on a 28-year-old, because he'll be 28 next summer, on a 28-year-old Paul Pogba who is playing like this? If he keeps playing like this, then who wants him?
Let's take it back to player power then. Let's go back to the start of the show. And we're in a situation here. Who holds the cards on this one? Because, look, I always think of David De Gea's situation. Remember when David De Gea almost moved to Real Madrid? He held all the cards. Like, he wanted to go. United seemed powerless to stop him. The only thing that could stop him was a fax machine. The fax machine did.
No, we held one card. Yeah. We held one card. First of all, I think De Gea was involved in this. I don't think De Gea wanted to leave. Okay. When you think about it, De Gea, his girlfriend wanted him to leave, and you can't say I want to stay in Manchester and not expect there to be problems at home. But he never said he wanted to leave at all. Well, go ahead and finish.
Yeah, that's an argument for another day. That's fine. I take your point on that. But let's just say, even with the situation with Pogba now, it looked like 2 years ago, because he had time on his contract, and because United didn't want to sell him because he was such an asset to the team, to the club. It looked like he had all the cards, because it looked like Raiola was his agent and he can get this move. Now we're in a situation where COVID struck. He's not playing well. People might not want to pay that money for him. All of a sudden, I think the balance of power has shifted back to Manchester United now, and it will become their choice now whether this player has a future at the club and not Pogba's choice. And do you agree with that? And, it's on player power again, and just this idea of player power.
Yeah, so it's an interesting one because they both have cards. So, if Real Madrid came and offered United $50 million for Paul Pogba, I'd take that money and run. And he'll go. But they're not going to offer 50. At this point, at best, the best you could hope for is probably the 20 million that Spurs got for Christian Eriksen. That's at best. But Pogba still holds a card. If that money is coming from AC Milan and Pogba doesn't want to go there, or they're not going to offer Pogba the amount of money that he's making at United, he could say, no, I am not leaving and I will stay. And I'm going to, next year when they don't have to spend 20 million on the transfer fee, maybe I'll be able to see more of that money. Because look, Real Madrid aren't going to buy him. They're not going to come in for a 28-year-old Pogba. Real Madrid are not your older brother's Real. They are not the team that just buys every shiny toy. They actually put a lot of thought and strategy into their transfers. Since 2013, they have signed 6 players total over the age of 24. One of them was, I forgot his name, but he was an academy player who was bought with the buyback clause, as if like Sergio Reguilon. It was a buyback clause, so they got him back for cheap, and he was 25. The other four were goalkeepers, 2 of which were backup goalkeepers. And then the other one was Eden Hazard, who is the obvious exception. And the weird, after 6 years of smart spending, they signed Eden Hazard, which predictably blew up in their face. So you would think they've learned their lesson. Teams are not going to come for Pogba. And if they do, and if United accepts a lesser offer for him, he has that power to say, no, I am making more money here. I'm going to take 1 more year of all this money before leaving. And to go back to Lokash's comment, Pogba is still a huge asset for United. He is. That's the thing, is right now he's coming off the bench and making a big impact there. And it may not be the role he wants, but that's the role you got right now. Until you start playing more consistently, you're a squad player. And forget Pogba, the price tag. Pogba, who cares about having a 90 million pound player on your bench? United didn't spend 90 million pounds for the 27-year-old version of Paul Pogba. They spent it for the 23-year-old.
Yeah, Pogba will always be a huge asset, not regardless of his form, because he will drop eventually. But he off the field, he brings United a lot of money. There's no getting away from that. He's still a marketable asset like he was when they bought him. So, yeah, even in that regard, he's a huge asset. So, United have got some thinking to do on this one. I just want to say,
I want to address this question from Fermi Tipsy. Clubs that want to sign Pogba would still come for him because they know his value, but they won't, because they don't have the money. No. He is very expensive. United are going to want a fee, and then Mino Raiola is going to want a fee. And Paul Pogba, he wants his money. And most teams do not have the money for it, and they know it's not a smart deal to spend money on for a 28 or a 28-year-old player. So next summer, I don't expect anybody to come. And then if Pogba improves, maybe he's coming off the bench. here's the thing. If Pogba continues to play like this, no one is coming for him.
No.
If he plays better and he hits a good run of form, then United are going to be great and he's going to be leading the charge, and then United aren't going to want to sell him. So it's a bit of both, but like right now, especially in this pandemic, no one has the money to give Paul Pogba what he wants or what he's going to demand. Maybe they'll have it or when, maybe he'll be able to get his wages when they don't have to pay a transfer fee, or maybe he'll be coming off the bench as an impact sub next year for United. I think he is worth the most right now to United if they let him run out his contract. Even if he leaves for free, that's fine, because if Paul Pogba leaves, you need to replace him. And they have other holes in the squad. And replacing Pogba is not going to be... Jack Grealish, on the form he's in, Aston Villa next summer will be able to ask for the same 80 million, if not more. Oh, yeah. And every player that could replace Pogba, is going to cost in that region. And United don't have money right now. They're not very liquid and they're not doing well because of the pandemic. So he's worth more to you if you let him run out your contract and then see what other teams are offering, because it might very well be that he could still make the most money at Manchester United, and you'll sit there and say, okay, but you're going to be a squad player and you're going to come off the bench and we're going to rotate you in. And that's going to be the role that he has to accept, or he's going to have to move to a lower club who may not be in the Champions League if he wants to continue, if he wants to be a first choice player, unless his form drastically improves.
The other thing on this, Pauly, as well, is all the news coming out of Real Madrid is that next year they're going to be focusing their energy on a marquee side. Obviously, they didn't sign anyone this summer, as you know. That's because of COVID. There's no doubt about that. That's not going to improve by next year, I don't think, either, because obviously nothing's really changed in the world. So... But all the talk is that they want to sign someone like Mbappe. So I don't think, like a lot of summers, Pogba's going to be top of their priority list this summer anyway. So
they sign young players. They're going to go after that younger French midfielder before they go after Pogba. Okay. They want Mbappe. They want Haaland. Yeah. Those are the players they're going to go after. They're not going to spend money on Paul Pogba.
I agree totally. And just quickly, if you're watching, guys, do give this video a like and subscribe if indeed you are liking it. I'm sure you are. I don't know why you wouldn't be. We're doing a great job, aren't we, Pauly, as always?
Always.
Pauly, I just noticed in one of the comments as well, someone talked about Sancho. We'll have something on Sancho later on, so do stick around with us for that. I'm going to move it on now slightly, Pauly, completely different direction, actually, to Donny van de Beek. Scored again for the Netherlands, and inevitably we're getting this from United supporters saying, right, he's scoring for Holland. How the hell is he not getting in that United team? I can hear Mark saying it now. Mark, our friend on Red Devils Talk, he'll be sat in front of his Van de Beek curtains and he'll be saying, another goal for Donny. How does he not get in this team? And look, it's an interesting one, isn't it, Pauly? And I'll be honest with you, I don't know where I stand on it. I don't know the exact reason. I could understand why he didn't play the first few games, because obviously he's new to the team and nobody should walk straight into this team about who you are. But, just because he is scoring for Holland, do you think it's fair that now the fans are calling for him to start for us more and play more of an important role in our team, Pauly?
Donny van de Beek is going to have his day. Maybe he was bought as the long-term successor for Pogba, and in which case they want to give him time to settle in, which he has to do. His primary position happens to be the same one that Bruno Fernandes plays, who happens to be our best player, who happens to be the one carrying the team on his back. So why would you take Bruno out of the team? And when Bruno isn't having a good game, it's a problem for us, because when Bruno doesn't have a good game, the whole team stinks. And we saw that against Chelsea. We saw that against Arsenal. And against Arsenal, Bruno was replaced by Van de Beek because he was having a terrible game. So Van de Beek is going to have his day in court. But like you ask right now, the same question of Paul Pogba is, where does he fit in? Because again, you need to bolster that midfield. Van de Beek can play deeper. He did at Ajax. It's not his primary position, and Solskjaer gave him a chance the other day, and he couldn't stay in position. He wandered all over the field. We were susceptible to counterattacks. That's not to say he can't play there and, forget that. It's to say he didn't do the job the first time. And could when's the next time to experiment with that? When's the next time to give him a chance? Because you couldn't go back to it against Everton. He was terrible. Van de Beek he could not stay in position against Istanbul. You had to make a change there. And further up the pitch, that's Bruno. You have room for Juan Mata coming off the right. Maybe Van de Beek can play there.
Yeah.
Or maybe but do you want to put him out on the right? Or are you saying that, he wasn't, that's not his best position. We want to give him the best chance to succeed. What I do know is that, he was signed for depth because we're one injury away from being terrible. So, and Bruno Fernandes has already played over 1,000 minutes in the league since September. It's far too much. He's playing for Portugal twice. Then he's going to come play every minute for us. He's going to need a break. That's why we have Van de Beek. The month of December, everybody starts playing twice a week. Van de Beek's going to be fresher. It's going to give him an advantage.
Yeah.
But the number one thing is he's going to have his day in court. Remember, if you talk about the late 90s and early 2000s United, who was the midfield is what I would ask. And you would respond to me, Giggs, Scholes, Keane, Beckham. That would be your midfield four. Well, remember, Nicky Butt played 30 games a year in the league. Nicky Butt, Phil Neville, Nicky Butt was a great player. And yeah, he wasn't first choice, but he knew I have 25 starts in the league and I'm going to make 31 appearances and I'm going to play, I'm going to make 11 appearances in the Champions League or, 11 extra appearances in all competitions. And Ferguson knew he had games for Nicky Butt. And every year, if you fast forward now another 10 years, we remember how great Michael Carrick was. We remember that now. We remember that every year because every year we went in and we went, who's our central midfielders? These are the guys that we're going to give a shot to. And Carrick never really played until October. And it was when Carrick came in October that we went, oh, right, Carrick's still the best one. And why didn't he play until October? As Ferguson always just said, can't play you until it starts raining. You're not good when it's dry. I need, once it starts raining and the field's wet, then I can play you. So he'll have his day. It's coming. Trust me, it is coming. But also,
I think this is a good point brought up by Mimic. If you want to bring it up at the bottom here, Paulie, one of the comments that just come in. It just seems like Ollie doesn't want to give up that defensive solidarity with Scott and Fred, and I think that's spot on. Van de Beek, like you said, Paulie, and he showed it against Istanbul. He's one of these players that wants to have freedom of the pitch. He wants to be able to roam. He wants to be able to, get involved in the game. Spray passes. Probably the same as Paul Pogba does. To be honest. Players like this don't want to be tied down to a position, and maybe even Bruno to some extent. We've seen that issue with Bruno. Obviously, Ollie's brought it up himself as well. But that's the thing, Paulie. Isn't it? At the moment, this team has to have a structure, and it has to be disciplined in that structure. For everything to work, because obviously we need that midfield solidarity. We need that toughness in midfield because, as we've shown already this season, the back four is vulnerable. So actually, we can't afford, as sad as it might seem, we can't afford to have players who are just going to feel like they have a license to roam and move out of position because that's no good for us, is it?
Right. And you would have said, we all would have said prior to the Istanbul match, oh, they're a team that's just going to sit back, and that's the kind of team that causes us problems. We should put in an extra attacking player, and that's what Solskjaer did. And he did this last year with Andreas Pereira at times in the league, in the cups and stuff, and he put him next to Matic, so that Matic could really, to make Pereira look half decent. And it worked to an extent. Pereira is still Pereira. And the teams that they played this against were bad. So he puts him against Matic, but Van de Beek just couldn't stay in position. And for a team, everybody complains, Maguire, Lindelof, Matic, they lack pace. For a team that lacks pace all over the pitch, Shaw, we don't concede a lot of counterattacks. The times that we did was this year, on the opening day against Crystal Palace.
No preseason.
And Scott McTominay couldn't, he was the holding midfielder and he couldn't stay in position either. And we let Palace have a free run at our back four. And then we gave up counterattacks against Istanbul. And I understand the first goal was, or both goals were The first goal was because of horrific defending, and that has nothing to do with anybody. Everybody was out of position. And the second goal was Fernandes put Mata in a terrible situation, and your fullbacks had already pushed up the pitch because we were in possession, and they went back. But we conceded a lot of counters in the first half, and it's because Van de Beek couldn't play, or he couldn't stay in position. So, it's not giving up on him playing there. He just needs more time to settle in. He needs more time to learn that role, and he'll get it. There are going to be games where Solskjaer could say, I could give you a chance in this game. But the following game from that was Everton, and we couldn't do that. So you're right. Like, we couldn't give up that defensive solidity. And let's bring up this question from Chris Johnson.
Yeah, I was going to ask that, Pauly. This is a bugging question that I think everyone wants answering. Is Van de Beek Ollie's signing? I do want to ask you this, Pauly, because, again, it's an interesting question. It's the one that people keep going back to, and it's the only reason people can think he's not in the team. They don't look at it from your point of view. They're looking at it from the fact that, well, I don't think Ollie wanted him, so that's why he's not playing. It can't be as simple as that, really, can it, Pauly?
Yeah, it's people like to make things like last week. I saw somebody saying like, "Oh, Wan-Bissaka." It was actually Hater. It was so Hater, if you're listening, I'm calling you out. Like saying like, "Oh, Wan-Bissaka wasn't an Ollie signing." It's like, get out of here. Van de Beek was an Ollie signing. Was he Ollie's first choice? No, he was not. We all know that he wanted Jack Grealish. Why did he want Jack Grealish? Because Jack Grealish provides us with something that we lack, which is creativity off the left, especially against the deep block. And why do we lack that? Because of Marcus Rashford. And that is how we are going to segue into, let's look at our poll question.
So yeah, Pauly, as you know, we like to put one of these up usually about 24 hours before the show. Get over to @UnitedHappyHour, our Twitter page for this channel, for this show, not channel, for this show, brought to you by EFS Media. And do get involved with us every week and have your say. Even tell us why you may make a certain selection. But our poll today, Pauly, if you want to whack it up, big up for us. Have you got it there? You normally have, mate. Yeah, there it is. So the episode question today was, what would you take if it was between a straight swap? Oh, sorry, here we go. A straight swap between Marcus Rashford and Jadon Sancho. Which club would say no to this deal? Now, interestingly, Pauly, I don't know if you've got it there, you probably haven't, but then you later put something in the replies when the votes were going a particular way because you were a little bit concerned that maybe...
It wasn't that the votes were going a particular way. It was like within 5 minutes, and I was seeing what people were responding to. Yeah. So it was take out the fact that Rashford's a homegrown player. Take out the fact that he's feeding every kid in the UK. It is strictly football based. And let's imagine that both players are keen on the switch and that they're happy with the club. Who would you want in your team? Or which club would say, no, we're not making that deal?
Now, I find that really interesting, Bob, because actually, I think, again, this is how sad I am. I think I was probably the first person to vote on this. And I maybe thought a little bit like that when I was voting, to be fair. But I've got to be honest with you, the results for me are quite interesting. And again, I don't know whether that's a lot because of people have just ignored what we said and they have voted that way, or whether they genuinely feel this. But for me, Pauly, as well, it's all about position, because at the moment, I think we see with Rashford, his best performances come for United on the left wing or if he plays down the middle, whereas obviously, as we know, Sancho was going to be a right winger. And to be honest with you, frankly, when I see Rashford on that right wing, I'm not convinced whatsoever, and I don't think he is. That's not where he wants to play. But what I will say is I have watched Sancho a couple of times this season. I made a point of doing that because obviously after we missed out on him this year, I was almost thinking...
Oh, you're watching the wrong season.
Yeah, glutton for punishment. I have to see what he's doing here. And if he plays really well, I know I'm only just going to feel even more miserable about having this one. But I've got to be honest with you, his performances this season have been a little bit less impressive. Now, I don't know if that's anything to do with COVID, to do with the pre-season, so many factors, it's so hard to judge. But actually, if I'm judging it after the start of this season and what's happened, and then go with that, then I think that the people have got it about right. But I am surprised it's so wide. Are you?
Yeah, I'm not surprised that the discrepancy in the results are so wide. because I think this is part of United's problem, is that everyone overrates Marcus Rashford. We think he's unbelievable, incredible. He's really good. He's not a superstar. And this is why, I mean, now when you factor in everything that he does off the pitch, yeah, he's a superstar. But on the pitch, he's not a superstar. And this is why Jack Grealish was Ollie's number one signing, or was his number one target after Jadon Sancho. Jadon Sancho was to fill that hole on the right wing. And Jack Grealish was, when people say, well, where would he get in the team? He'd get in the team, not every week, but in a lot of games, he'd get in the team over Marcus Rashford. Because Marcus Rashford, the same way that we say, oh, you know, Ollie can win the big games. He knows how to set up his team to play on the counter, but he can't break down low blocks. Marcus Rashford disappears in those games. And
he's a reflection of Ollie, isn't he? And the struggles that Ollie's had. Like you say, Ollie struggles against a low block. Rashford struggles against a low block. Rashford scores plenty of goals against the bigger teams. United score plenty of goals against
every time he does it, and he does it a lot. Every time he does it, everybody gawks at it. Oh, big game player. Like, oh, look at his record against Chelsea and against City and this and that. Yes, it's fantastic. What's his record against, against Everton and against West Brom and against Bournemouth? What's his record there? And let's bring it up. We're against teams that sit deep. We are I define this as like when United have all the possession. So if they have more than 55% of the possession, that's when they're sitting deep. If we have less, that's, one of those back and forth games. And you see it. Last year, he disappears. He gets slightly less shots, but he gets significantly less goals. And this is, I took out the penalties unless they were specifically won by him, which is a lot of them. But he only wins those penalties. Who did he win penalties against? Tottenham, City, Chelsea. On the first, he's only winning those penalties in those quote unquote big games. And the trend is continuing this season. And his numbers look really good in this thing because he had a fantastic game against Newcastle where he actually took 7 shots. 7 of his 13 shots came in this game against Newcastle. He had his XG per shot was 0.1. In all the other games, he's taken 6 shots and it's 0.02 XG. And like Newcastle was a weird game because as much as we had all the possession, we did manage to get them to open up a bit and come out, and we did manage to create space in behind. So that's where he's at his best. Clearly, when there's space in behind, he kills teams. When there isn't space in behind, he struggles. And that's why you would want a Jack Grealish. And the reason that if you're United, you want to do this deal is because a right winger, especially one like Jadon Sancho, is rare. Very rare. A left winger who cuts in and can play as a second forward the way Rashford does is much easier to find. Not going to say like, oh, it's easy and he's easily replaceable, but it's much easier to find another player that can step up and become Marcus Rashford than it would be to find a right winger. So
that was going to be my next question to you, Paulie. Like, what do United need right now more? Is it a right winger that is the caliber of Sancho, or a left winger that's the caliber of Rashford? I mean, you take Rashford out of that team, and as much as I hate to say, I feel bad saying it, but you could see United managing, to be honest. There's options there. That they've got, other players who can play on that left wing. They can bring in players. I just think with Sancho on that right wing, like you said, it's become a very sort of specialised position, hasn't it, in a weird sort of way, especially the way wide forwards play these days, where they want to come in onto their other foot and things like that. So, yeah, I think because it's so niche what Sancho gives you, that's why I think the need is greater, to be fair. But remember when we were good at breaking down defensive teams was post-restart. Yeah. Post-lockdown. And that's when everybody was like, well, Rashford is on bad form and it looks terrible. And we changed his role. We tried to turn him into more of a facilitator rather than a forward. And I'm not going to say he did a bad job in that role, but yeah, everybody was like, well, what's up with Rashford? Why is he
why isn't he performing? And Mimic has this question, does this take into account when he's playing left wing versus striker? It's both, but what we've seen him last year when he played striker, he scored one goal as the lone striker. And that was a penalty against Leicester, which he won, big game. Leicester were a good team. He won the penalty and he took it and he scored, but that was it. He's not a striker in Ollie's system. He can't play with his back to goal the way that Ollie needs his strikers to play. The thing is, though, at the end of the day, when push comes to shove, I think United are the team that have to say no to this deal for this reason. There is no way they can win the deal because you don't know how Jadon Sancho will adapt to the Premier League.
Yeah.
And you don't know how he'll do against teams that sit deep. When England play teams that sit deep, Jadon Sancho tends to struggle a bit. Now it's, that's international football and England, Gareth Southgate has the tendency to play way too many defensive minded players at once, but Rashford will thrive at Dortmund because of the way they play. They are a big time counter-attacking side, but also because there's so much space. Teams in Germany don't sit back. There's always space to run in behind. And you put Rashford in a team like that, he's going to thrive versus Jadon Sancho. Maybe he thrives, maybe he doesn't.
Yeah, it's the unknown, isn't it? And I think obviously that was the big thing with paying obviously the big money. And to be honest with you, Paul, like I say, even more so now looking at how this season he has struggled to pick up where he left off last season. It will be interesting if United ever do that deal to see whether that was a season that was just a blip, whether it was a season where he's kind of thrown his toys out the pram, for want of a better word, because he didn't get his move, or whether it's a little bit like, well, not like Alexis Sanchez, that's because they're complete different ages. But look, with Alexis Sanchez, we should have seen the warning signs there, because if you remember the last year to 6 months at Arsenal, he was so poor, and a lot of people blame that on the fact that he wanted to move and he wanted to get out, whereas I think we started to see a bit of a decline there as well. And you have to look for these things, don't you? So it'd be interesting. Was the last couple of seasons a fluke for Sancho? I don't know. We'll never know until we see him.
You cannot put up the numbers he put up at 19 and 20, playing for the runner-up in the Bundesliga and in the Champions League. You don't put up those numbers 2 years in a row as a fluke. Like we've seen Dortmund produce some great players, and there's a stat guy who's a Borussia Dortmund fan who counts hockey assists. So I'm American, so I like this because frankly we should be counting hockey assists because the pass that sets up the pass is equally as important. Like this is where players like Nemanja Matic and Fred shine. Like when they make that line-breaking pass to Bruno Fernandes and allow him to play in Anthony Martial, like that goal doesn't happen if Martial or if Fred or Pogba or Matic don't play that decisive pass. If they just go square to Shaw, so like we should be looking at that. And so he tracks it. He's tracked those for about 5 years for Borussia Dortmund. And Jadon Sancho, who had like 18 assists last year, had like another 15 second assists or the pass before the assist. He had like 15 of them. And he did that the year before also. And he has done, like Ousmane Dembele was tremendous the year before Sancho arrived. Jadon Sancho dwarfs him. Like there is just no other player in Europe who produces at the rate that Sancho produces at. The assists were always like, he was always going to regress a little bit because the assists were always high because he was benefiting from really good finishing. Yeah. And like his underlying numbers are still good this year. There is a little drop off, and you could probably attribute that to he didn't get the move he wanted, and he might have been upset for a few weeks, but he's coming back. But then the underlying numbers are there. So like this goes back to what we were saying about Paul Pogba. Like if I give you the ball at midfield and you take on a defender, beat him, and then shoot from 30 yards out and it goes in, I get an assist. I did nothing. If you beat three players, go down to get into the box, round the goalkeeper, and then play it right across, and all I have to do is tap it in, and I miss, you don't get an assist, which is ridiculous because you did all the work, you were spectacular, and I screwed up. So it's the same thing. It's like Pogba setting up his teammates, and it's not work, and like they're missing. Sancho is still setting up his teammates. They are just not finishing at the same rate, but he is still just he's still such a player. And we'll bring up Lokish saying Rashford can add those attributes slowly, and he can. But here's the thing: like Rashford's this is what, going to be his 5th year. Yeah, this is basically his 5th year in senior football. Like typically in your 5th year at the age of 23, like you kind of are what you are, and it'll be hard for him to reinvent himself at this stage.
It's a mentality thing with Rashford, isn't it? I think I've touched on this before, that actually this idea that he can become a selfish goal scorer, it has to be innate in you, Paulie. We've talked about it before about Harry Kane and how he's born to score goals, and I think Rashford doesn't quite have that selfishness in him, and I think I've always said you've either got it or you haven't. He may show a bit more now under Ollie, someone like who's a born finisher like Ollie, who can instill some principles into him, but at the end of the day, it's a personality thing for me. But I just want to quickly ask you, Paulie, before we wrap up quickly.
Let me just say this, to go with what you were saying, against Leipzig with two, he had 2 goals, and he broke into the box coming off that right side, and he didn't shoot. And I was like, here's your shot for the hat trick. He didn't shoot. He went around another guy. Then he finally shot, and it got blocked. And then when they win the penalty, and Martial,
Paulie, that tells you all you need to
do. No. That was Solskjaer was instructing Martial to take the penalty, and that's good because you needed to get Martial off the mark, that was the right move. That was the right move. But I also said Rashford doesn't deserve to take the penalty because he didn't shoot that ball before. If he shot that ball before and he missed or something, that's fine. But the fact that you're coming in and you're supposed to be a striker and you're coming in with 2 goals, you're on your hat trick, and you aren't letting loose as soon as you get into a good shooting position, like you don't deserve it. Like he did get it he got into a good shooting position, and Martial found him, and he was able to get his hat trick. But at that moment, he didn't deserve it. Go on with what you were going to say.
I was just going to say finally, Paulie, just quickly on this, and it is a quick one. We asked on that in the comments. We said about try and take emotion out of it. Forget that he's our player and everything like that. Look, we've talked about this on Red Devils Talk and on other shows, Paulie, me and you, about McTominay, for example. A lot of people get blinded by this fact that McTominay is someone who's come through our academy, and that when you're asking people to answer a question like the poll, and a club like Manchester United, where we're so mad on how you're bringing through from the youth, it's what we're built on as a club. Is it almost impossible for them to think, actually, I can't think about this fact that I can't take out the emotion that has come through the academy? How much of an influence should that be?
Yeah, it's a huge influence. It's the McTominay one is a great example. I put out a thread this morning talking about the really good things that I saw from McTominay against Everton. And the best thing I saw was when he missed 2 passes in a row. He gave the ball away 2 times in a row. And I was like, but he's trying to go forwards. And usually he plays safe and plays square there. So the fact that he's now looking for these passes is such a good notion from it. And, I put out this long thread being like, this is good. Like he's improving here. And people are say, oh, like McTominay's biggest critic is praising him and everything. Cause back post lockdown, people on Twitter would say, I had a McTominay agenda, or I had an agenda against McTominay. And I always said people say, oh, you hate McTominay. I don't hate McTominay. I like him. I really like the passion and the energy that he brings. My agenda is I'm not going to pretend that someone's a better footballer than they are because he came from our academy. And people always say like, oh, but you saw him against City and this, it's like, yes, I've always said he is great in those games where we take responsibilities away and all you have to do is go break up play. It's fantastic. When teams sit back and they say, here, Scott, you have the ball, pick us apart with your passing. He really struggles. And because of that, United struggle because he's slow on the ball and he lets defenses get set and he doesn't pick them out when, he wins the ball back and you have 5 seconds before the defense can set. You need to make that first pass really quickly. And he doesn't. And it takes away from our attack, and all the numbers backed it up. When McTominay played against teams that sat back, United could not scored significantly less than when anybody else played when against teams that sat back. And people would say, oh, but that's because Bruno arrived. And it was like, even in the games that before Bruno arrived, when McTominay didn't play, we created a lot more chances. We scored more goals. And, so there was no agenda there. And it's this year, McTominay is getting better. So it's call it as you see it. Like I don't hate the guy. I'm very happy he's getting better. And I'm going to point it out. I'm going to point out, these are the things that I've said. This is what's been holding him back. And it's great to see that he's getting better in these areas. And now we just want to see it consistently. We want to see it continue because he played okay for 70 minutes against Newcastle. And then the last 20 minutes, he was great. Yeah. And then he was great against PSG. But again, that's a game that plays in your hands. He didn't have to do the passing. He just had to hit it in the space. But then he didn't play well against Chelsea. And then he didn't play well against Arsenal. And, we put him in a situation to fail against Istanbul. So I don't hold that against him at all. That's on Solskjaer. And then,
even though, Paulie, how many of our fans out there are so eager for change and all this and the other, and so impatient for success, but yet they want to see our academy players play game after game after game, and are willing to be patient with those guys, but not with the overall team.
Well, yeah, that's exactly the thing. And this goes to what we were saying last week about being a hypocrite. You cannot tell me, you cannot say, but you can't respond to me and say, but McTominay's improving, and then tell me that the manager and the backroom coaches don't do any coaching. McTominay's not improving magically. He's improving because he is working at it. He is working at it with these coaches. And you can't tell me when I say, McTominay is not good enough to play for Manchester United week in, week out right now. At this moment, he is not good enough. Yeah. If your response is, but he's getting better and he needs a run of games to really improve and he needs to play.
Yeah, then don't worry about the manager either. Don't worry about the manager.
Right, that's fine. But it's because he's inconsistent. So when he has a bad game and United lose because of that, you cannot then turn on the manager because if he is not good enough and you are saying, but he's getting better and we have to give him a run of games, then you have to accept that some of those games are going to be bad.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, I agree, Paulie. Fantastic.
Yeah. This was great. Another great happy hour. England are kicking off. The U.S. are not losing, which is good. Probably playing really boring because Berhalter sucks. But thank you so much for, once again, listening, subscribing, like it, rate it, give us 5 stars, hammer that subscribe button for the Elite Football Show. This is the United Happy Hour presented by the Elite Football Show. Thank you so much for getting involved in the comments. We will be back on Tuesday. It's still an international break, so hop in. We should be back at our normal time. Hop in, get it. We will do another show where we really get involved with the comments that we're getting. Joe, always a pleasure. Have a great night.
Cheers, man. You.